I've always loved Ghibli movies. And one of my favorite Ghibli films to this day has to be Laputa, The Castle in the Sky. I think I enjoyed it because of the crazy characters and wild plane designs, paired with fantastical world building and imagery, which are all iconic features in most Miyazaki films. However, none of those high-speed action scenes quite live as clearly in my mind as another, much more toned-down scene. It's the scene where Patsu and Shita have landed in the castle in Laputa. We pan out to see the expanse of this giant, overgrown kingdom, all with just one of many incredible pieces of music written for the film playing. Then we go back to our two heroes, and it all goes quiet. They come across a robot who approaches them and back away in fear, only for it to lift their aircraft gently, revealing a nest of flycatchers. The robot then turns around and walks away. And this whole scene is done in complete silence, with only a sentence or two of dialogue or the sound of the robot's heavy movements being present. There is no music or use of sound effects. Yet, oddly enough, this lack of sound or music affected me far more than I had expected, and it's not just this scene that did this. There are multiple instances in the original Japanese version of Castle in the Sky that utilize a lack of music to focus on other elements of the scene, and even in other Ghibli films. Some of the most notable of them being the beginning of the train scene in Spirited Away, or the many nature scenes in Princess Mononoke. Miyazaki himself has talked about this use of silence. He uses what he refers to as ma, meaning a pause. It refers to the Japanese idea of empty, quiet space or negative space. It is designed to be a moment of simply taking in what we are being shown and existing in the present, however a very intentional moment. We see these moments of taking in the space and world around us all over Ghibli movies, and in a lot of these scenes we are intentionally shown shots or visuals that we are not meant to understand, but instead to just acknowledge and appreciate. It kind of reminds me of the feeling you'd get if you were waiting in someone else's home, in silence. All their belongings and furniture are not meant for you. You are not meant to understand anything here, because it is not your world. You are a visitor. You are sitting there with a sense of newfound sensitivity in the space, waiting for what is to come, while still being in the present. Ghibli's use of ma can even be seen in Ghibli films that would typically be called more childish or juvenile, like another one of my favorites, Ponyo.
It's him! Careful, it's hot! Ha, 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 ha. A goldfish!
In one of the very first scenes in Ponyo, little to no music is played when Sasuke first finds Ponyo and rescues her. This gives the audience more of an ability to focus on who Sasuke is and how this scene defines him. Later in the movie, we see something similar done with Ponyo's scene in the tunnel, only this time the silence feels more uneasy for the purpose of making us understand the characters' feelings and how alone they are in this part of the story. But all the while giving us enough space to not find any of these feelings too obvious or too simple. These quiet moments can last from a few seconds to several minutes, which in a normal context would develop into quite a repetitive and awkward problem. However, this never seems to become the case, and that's thanks to the amazing writing, sound design, and directing. In almost all of these scenes found in Ghibli movies, the silence is usually accompanied by a lot of Foley or naturalistic sound effects, such as in this scene. Miyazaki seems to often put special attention and effort into these Ma scenes. Even though they are designed for the audience to rest, he creates an almost pure moment full of thinking and simply taking in beauty. The result is a very intimate feeling of connection to the beauty of that world, and a further connection with how our character experiences their journey. But if this trick of silence used is so effective, why haven't a lot of other studios taken it on? Miyazaki has said that he thinks people who make movies are scared of silence, because they worry the audience will get bored. Animation studios like Disney, along with all of the studios partly or entirely owned by Disney, have often showed their admiration for Ghibli films through inspiration or references. Even so, they rarely manage to pull off Ghibli's more patient form of storytelling, despite taking so much influence from this. I don't think it's fair to say that this is simply because Western writers cannot do this, for we have seen it done before, especially in projects that focus more on the writer's vision than wide financial success. But more specifically, I think the direction and goals of big studio Western animations tend to be very different to that of something like Ghibli. Disney is heavily marketed towards children, with a strong emphasis on using children's stories to create animations. And while Ghibli does this as well, it has something that Disney often lacks, especially currently: an ability to never underestimate the patience and intellect of children. Because of this, we have seen Disney fall from the masterful writing it previously had to cheap attempts at nostalgia, without considering that viewers, even at a young age, can tell when a project is only made for a cheap cash grab, with as little effort put into its ideas as possible. The writers who do want to create new and challenging ideas are limited, and remake after remake is published. This lack of patience we see from Hollywood and Disney can also be seen in how they handle dubbing over Ghibli films. This has been an ongoing thing with Ghibli's movies, and more specifically Miyazaki's movies. Disney has often handled dubbing over the English voices for Ghibli, but this has on many occasions resulted in a lot of cutting, added music where it's not necessary, and, although rarely, having entire segments of a scene removed because it was seen as too boring or entirely unnecessary. These are usually scenes that establish a location and the natural sounds that appear in said location, or scenes with no dialogue and no music, instead only having that quiet natural noise. Just look at this snippet from The Castle in the Sky in its original Japanese version, and then dubbed over with added music.
No!
Hey, I found her! She's hiding out here!
Don't let her escape! Quick, get her!
いたママいた隠れてた早く捕まえるんだ
The reason for why this use of sound and music is consistently used has to do with the mindset the studio seems to have about filmmaking. That it should not be a hollow experience trying to grab your attention, but something that can give you enough room to breathe and take in the world of the story. This silence works because we are given space to simply absorb what we are being shown. And then when music is really needed for a scene, we are far more affected by its presence, because we have become more aware of those smaller details. Another scene that uses silence excellently is midway through Howl's Moving Castle, when Sophie is sitting alone outside. What I like about this scene is that the music you would usually put in this scene would serve the purpose of indicating what Sophie is thinking or feeling in the moment. But that's the thing. We don't know right away, and we don't need to know immediately. Our understanding of how Sophie feels throughout the film is a slow and curious process, which, if they had used music for that scene, would have been less effective and less mysterious. I guess the point of this analysis is not to say storytellers should abandon high-energy writing with constant music, but rather that I think it's vital for us to explore other forms of storytelling all the time, and to see how different methods can lead to different results. Most big-budget films currently use a very formula blockbuster writing style, while Ghibli and other studios that use these unique approaches to storytelling remain better than ever. This art of silence is just one of many things that big-budget studios seem to underestimate. And yet, with more independent projects, small creators, and new writers, we are seeing a whole new era of experimental uses of sound, visuals, and writing being utilized, which leaves us with a newfound appreciation for how Ghibli uses the art of silence.
God's pretty words will break it like they've broken mine.